What do Pikachu having a black tail, Mickey Mouse wearing suspenders, and Henry VIII eating a turkey leg have in common? The answer? We'll find out later in this video, where we cover the Mandela Effect, which refers to a situation in which a large mass of people believe that an event occurred when it did not. So does your memory serve you right? Let's find out in this video. The Berenstein Bears is a childhood classic. In this show, it follows a family of bears known as the Berenstein Bears as they figure out life together. But how many of you guys actually remember it being Berenstein Bears, placed with an E instead of an A? But if you take a deep look at it now, it's actually Berenstein Bears with an A. Many people even have claimed to have seen it with the letter E instead of A. However, when you take a look at it nowadays, there's just an A. Pikachu's missing tail. Now, we all know Pikachu. He's one of the most iconic Pokemon in the series. But how many of you guys actually remember Pikachu's design? I mean, try to think as far back as you can. Well, if you were like me, you remembered him with a black tail. In fact, there was times in my childhood where I would draw him with a black tail. But surprisingly, it turns out he never had black stripes on his tail ever. In fact, his entire tail, besides the bottom part, is yellow. And this can be shown throughout the old episodes too. The Monopoly Man and his monocle. Monopoly, the game that would tear apart families. If you've never heard of Monopoly, it is a real estate board game for 2 to 8 players. And the player's goal is to remain financially solvent while forcing opponents into bankruptcy by buying and developing pieces of property. And this board game's been around for quite some time. It actually developed in 1935. However, how many of you guys actually remember the Monopoly Man having a monocle? I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is his iconic monocle. Where would he be without it? But contrary to popular belief, he never had one. Now, how is this possible? It gets deeper. How many of you guys remember Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? Well, if you remember it, you will also remember that the Wicked Queen in Snow White famously says, "Mirror, mirror on the wall," or does she? Now you guys are gonna think that I'm lying to you. However, she actually says, "Magic mirror on the wall." I mean, there's even a movie titled Mirror, Mirror after the iconic quote. It released in 2012, however, that's the iconic line. Here's a somewhat recent one. American Psycho movie was popularized off of a bunch of memes that have taken place recently, particularly belonging to the Sigma male category of memes. However, do you remember this scene? The scene in which Patrick Bateman wrinkled his eyebrows. However, he never did. And there's countless TikToks that do the same thing, all wrinkling their eyebrows. But for what? I mean, we're discovering these things even as the days go by. Have any clue what it means? Maybe we'll find out by the end of this video. But before we take a deeper dive, please do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you like this type of content. That way, if this phenomenon ever takes place again, you'll see if you really truly liked or not. Curious George, one of my favorite childhood TV shows, and I'm sure it was plenty of yours as well. In this show, it follows the story of an orphan monkey named George and his adventures with the man in the yellow hat. The two have many episodes together, but one thing you may have not have noticed was, if you take a look at George, where is his tail? Most people remember him swinging around with a tail, but he is actually tailless. Now, this is even a shocker to me because in many of the book covers and illustrations, you can see this. Which is surprising because he's not a chimpanzee either. He's identified in the show as a little monkey. So ideally he should have a tail. Now, how many of you guys like Star Wars? Well, this one's gonna be quite interesting to you. Does Luke, "I am your father" ring a bell? Well, yeah, it's a legendary line from Star Wars, right? Wrong, as many believe the famous quote is actually, "No, I am your father." And Darth Vader actually never mentions Luke. Now, this is one I just can't wrap my head around, because everybody mentions Luke, "I am your father." It's iconic, that's the phrase. When in reality, this entire time, it's just, "No, I am your father." What does this all mean? Type your theories in the comments below, guys, because none of this makes sense. This one's for cereal lovers. What about Fruit Loops? How many of you guys remember eating Fruit Loops? Personally, I think they were delicious. And how many of you guys remember each individual Fruit Loop tasting different? Well, that's not the case because all of them are actually the same fruit flavor. There's even some people remembering Fruit Loops saying Fruit Loops, the actual F-R-U-I-T, instead of Fruit Loops as it normally is. But what truly is the Mandela Effect? Well, we know it's a phenomenon where people have shared false memories, in this case, a lot of people. However, many people believe that these false memories are evidence that parallel universes exist, and that we're beginning to shift in between them. Many people even go as far as to say that it's to condition us so we can't think for ourselves, to have more control over people, essentially. So now, before we get into the last and final two Mandela effects, you guys do not want to miss out on these. A Bug's Life, another classic Pixar movie that released in 1998. And man, I used to love this movie as a kid. How many of you guys actually remember seeing advertisements for A Bug's Life 2 and remembering there being A Bug's Life 2? Now, what is causing this confusion? I myself can even remember there being possibly A Bug's Life 2, but it not releasing. And now our last and final Mandela Effect. Many of you guys, if you're like me, love drinking soda, and specifically Coca-Cola. Now, Coca-Cola has a version of Coke named Coke Zero. And which one of these photos do you believe? Was it Coca-Cola Zero or Coke Zero? Now, this one really stuck to me because it turns out this entire time it was Coca-Cola Zero, when I remember it being Coke Zero. I mean, people even call it Coke Zero. It turns out Coke Zero never actually existed. The name was just Coca-Cola Zero. I mean, there's even countless Redditors that are saying it's always been Coke Zero. I noticed when the box and can said Coca-Cola Zero, and just like that, we made it through all 10. If you enjoyed the video, I'd love to see a comment of how many of you guys actually noticed some of these. And if you guys have any other examples of something that you remember entirely differently. This video was a ton of fun to make, and I appreciate all the support on my other videos. And as always, my friends, thank you for watching.